Hey folks, settle in for something a bit dusty, a bit grim, and a whole lot less glamorous than the movies would have you believe. Tonight, we're stepping into the muddy boots of a medieval peasant during the Crusades, a time of holy wars, clashing swords, and a whole lot of confusion for the average person just trying to survive. Forget the shining knights and epic battles you've seen on screen. For most people, the Crusades weren't about glory. They were about scraping by in a world turned upside down by faith, fear, and far-off wars. So, pull up your coziest blanket, dim the lights, and let's drift into the year 1096, where life is hard, the air smells of sweat and smoke, and the word crusade is starting to ripple through your tiny village. You're about to see history not from the castle towers, but from the dirt underfoot. Picture this. You're a peasant named Eadric, living in a small village somewhere in the fields of northern France. It's dawn, and you wake up on a lumpy straw mattress that's more bugs than bedding. The year is 1096, and the First Crusade is just starting to stir. You don't know much about it yet. News travels slowly when you're illiterate and your world is a 5-mile radius of mud and turnips. Your hut is a single room, walls made of wattle and daub, which is just a fancy way of saying sticks and mud plastered together. It leaks when it rains, which is often, and the smoke from the fire in the center of the room stings your eyes because there's no chimney, just a hole in the thatched roof. You share this space with your wife, 3 kids, a cousin who showed up last year and never left, and a couple of chickens that keep wandering in. Privacy, not a chance. The air smells like damp wool, stale bread, and whatever the goat outside is up to. You roll out of bed, your back already aching from yesterday's work in the fields. You're 25, but your body feels 50. Your joints creak like an old cart, and your hands are calloused from swinging a wooden hoe. You pull on your one outfit, a rough wool tunic that's been patched so many times it's more thread than fabric. No shoes today. They're reserved for church or when the ground freezes solid. Your feet are already caked in mud before you even step outside. Breakfast is a bowl of pottage, a thick, grayish stew of barley, onions, and whatever herbs you could scrounge. It's been simmering in the same pot for days, and you're pretty sure a mouse fell in last night, but you don't ask questions. You wash it down with small beer, weak and slightly sour, because the water from the stream might kill you faster than starvation. Your kids are already up, the youngest tugging at your sleeve, asking for more bread. There isn't any. The harvest was bad this year, and the Lord took most of it for his taxes. As you chew your gritty pottage, you hear the church bell ringing in the distance. It's not just calling you to prayer, it's signaling something bigger. A traveling preacher has come to the village, a wild-eyed man named Peter the Hermit, and he's been shouting about a holy war. You've heard whispers of this before, but today it's real. He stands in the village square, perched on a barrel, his voice booming about Jerusalem, a city you've never seen and can't even imagine. He says it's God's will to take it back from the infidels, people you've never met, in a land so far away it might as well be the moon. The crowd is buzzing, some nodding, some crying, others looking as confused as you feel. Peter talks about salvation, about sins being forgiven if you join this great pilgrimage. You're not sure what to make of it. You're a peasant, not a scholar. Your sins are small. Maybe you stole an extra apple from the Lord's orchard once, but the idea of a clean slate sounds tempting. You don't have much time to think about it, though. The sun's up, and work waits for no one. You trudge to the fields, your wooden plow dragged by a scrawny ox you share with 3 other families. The Lord's land comes first, always. You owe him 3 days of work a week, plus a share of your crops. If you're lucky, you'll have enough left to feed your family through winter. If not, well, you try not to think about that. As you dig furrows in the rocky soil, you overhear other peasants talking about the crusade. Some are excited, saying it's a chance to escape the grind, to see the world, maybe even come back with riches. Others are skeptical, muttering about leaving their families to starve. You're not sure where you stand. The preacher's words echo in your head, but so does the gnawing hunger in your stomach. By midday, your hands are blistered, and the sun is burning your neck. You pause to eat a hunk of rye bread, so hard it nearly cracks a tooth. You're chewing when a neighbor, Wulfric, limps over. He's older, maybe 40, which makes him ancient by village standards. He says he's thinking of taking the cross, joining the People's Crusade that Peter's been preaching about. You ask why, and he shrugs. What's left here? More mud? More taxes? If I die, maybe God'll let me into paradise. You nod, but you're not convinced. You've got kids to think about, a wife who's already coughing from the damp, and a lord who'll flog you if you miss a day's work. The crusade sounds like a dream, but dreams don't fill bellies. As the day drags on, you notice more strangers passing through the village. Ragged men and women, some with crosses sewn onto their tunics. They're heading east, toward a gathering point for this so-called People's Crusade. They carry no weapons, just staffs and sacks of whatever they could grab. Some are singing hymns. Others look half-starved already. You wonder how they'll make it to Jerusalem when they can barely make it to the next town. The village priest, Father Eadric, is encouraging everyone to join, saying it's God's work. But you've seen him pocket extra coins from the collection plate, so you take his words with a grain of salt. By evening, you're back in your hut, exhausted, your tunic soaked with sweat. Your wife is stirring the pottage, and the kids are fighting over a crust of bread. The talk of the crusade is everywhere now, like a fever spreading through the village. Some of your neighbors are packing up, ready to follow Peter the Hermit. You're not sure what to do. Part of you wants to believe in the promise of salvation, but another part knows life here is hard enough without chasing a holy war across the world. As you lie down on your bug-infested mattress, you stare at the smoky ceiling, wondering what a peasant like you is supposed to do when the world starts shouting about God's will. Morning breaks, and the village is buzzing with a restless energy you've never felt before. The year is still 1096, and the talk of the People's Crusade has spread like wildfire through the muddy lanes of your little world. You're Eadric, still aching from yesterday's work in the fields, still wearing the same scratchy tunic that smells like a mix of sweat and despair. But today feels different. The air is thick with whispers of salvation, of Jerusalem, of a chance to escape the endless grind of peasant life. You're not sure if it's hope or madness, but it's hard to ignore. As you slurp down another bowl of pottage, you can't help but overhear your neighbors arguing about whether to join the growing crowd heading east. You're still on the fence, but the world around you is starting to move, and it's pulling you along whether you like it or not. You step outside, and the village square is chaos. Peter the Hermit is back, preaching again, his voice hoarse but relentless. He's a wiry man with a beard that looks like it's been through a storm, and his eyes burn with a fire that makes you uneasy. He's shouting about the Holy Land, about how the Turks have defiled God's city, and how every soul who takes the cross will be cleansed of sin. The crowd is bigger now, men, women, even children, clutching homemade crosses or bits of cloth with crosses stitched on. Some are weeping. Others are chanting prayers you've only heard in church. You notice Wulfric, your neighbor, standing at the edge of the crowd, his face torn between doubt and longing. He catches your eye and shrugs, as if to say, "What else is there?" You don't have an answer. The Lord Steward, a sour-faced man named Godwin, is watching from the sidelines, arms crossed. He's not happy. The Lord needs workers, not pilgrims, and every peasant who leaves is one less pair of hands to plow his fields. You overhear him muttering to the priest about foolish rabble abandoning their duties. Father Eadric, though, is all in, waving his arms and blessing anyone who swears to join the crusade. You wonder if he's more excited about the offerings piling up at the church than the salvation of souls. Either way, the steward's glare makes it clear. If you leave, you're risking everything. Your land, your family's safety, maybe even your life when you come back. If you come back, you head to the fields, same as always, but the work feels heavier today. Your ox is stubborn, the plow keeps snagging on rocks, and your mind is elsewhere. You keep glancing at the road where a steady stream of people is passing through. Pilgrims, they call themselves, though they look more like beggars. Some carry nothing but a water skin and a stick. Others have carts piled with blankets, pots, and crying children. A few are singing, their voices carrying over the fields like a hymn you can't quite place. You recognize a woman from the next village, Alfric's widow, trudging along with her 2 boys. She's got no man to protect her, no money, no plan. You wonder what she thinks she'll find in Jerusalem, or if she's just running from the hunger that's been stalking her since her husband died. At noon, you sit under a scraggly tree, chewing your stale bread. Wulfric joins you, his face grim. He's made up his mind, he's going. He says he's got no family left, no reason to stay, and the preacher's words have sunk deep. If I die for God, he says, almost like he's trying to convince himself. You ask what he'll do for food, for protection. He doesn't know. God will provide. He mutters, but his eyes don't meet yours. You want to argue, to tell him he's mad to leave everything for a city he's never seen. But the words don't come. Instead, you hand him half your bread. He takes it, nods, and walks away, already looking like one of the pilgrims. By afternoon, the village feels emptier. Half a dozen families have left, their huts abandoned, their fields untended. The steward is furious, stomping around, threatening to seize the land of anyone who joins the crusade without permission. You hear him yell at a young man, Leofric, who's packing a sack to leave. Leofric doesn't care. He's got that same wild look in his eyes as the preacher, like he's already halfway to Jerusalem in his mind. You wonder if it's faith or desperation driving him. Maybe it's both. For you, the choice isn't so simple. Your wife, Etheldreda, is coughing worse today, and your youngest is too small to survive a winter without you. But the idea of salvation, of something bigger than this endless cycle of toil, keeps nagging at you. As the sun sets, you trudge home, your hands raw from the plow. The village is quieter now, but the air is heavy with tension. You pass the church, where Father Alric is still blessing pilgrims, his hands waving like he's casting a spell. You don't stop to listen. At home, Etheldreda is stirring the pottage, her face pale. She's heard the talk too, and she's scared. What if you go and don't come back? She asks, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have an answer. You want to tell her you'd never leave, but the preacher's words are stuck in your head like a splinter. You eat in silence, the fire crackling, the kids asleep on the floor. Outside, you hear the shuffle of feet. More pilgrims passing through in the dark, their voices low and fervent. You lie down, the straw mattress poking your back, and try to sleep, but your mind won't rest. The crusade is no longer just a story. It's a wave sweeping through your village, pulling people away like a tide. You wonder what it's like out there, beyond the fields, beyond the Lord's manor, beyond the world you've always known. You've never seen a city, let alone a holy one. You try to picture Jerusalem, but all you can imagine is more fields, more mud, maybe a bigger church. As you drift off, the sound of distant singing, pilgrims on the road, mixes with the wind, and you wonder if you're being left behind or spared. The sun creeps over the horizon, painting the village in a dull gray light. It's been a week since Peter the Hermit's preaching set your world alight, and the First Crusade, specifically the Ragtag People's Crusade, is no longer just talk. You're Eadric, still tethered to your plow and your patch of land, but the village feels like it's unraveling. Half your neighbors are gone, their huts empty, their fields sprouting weeds. The ones who stayed are restless, whispering about those who left for Jerusalem, wondering if they're heroes or fools. You're still here, still digging in the dirt, but the pull of the crusade is like an itch you can't scratch. Today, you're about to see what happens when faith and desperation collide head-on with reality. You're in the fields early, the air sharp with the chill of late spring. Your ox is sluggish, and your plow keeps catching on roots. You're not alone. Other peasants are out, too, but the usual chatter is replaced by a tense silence. The Lord Steward, Godwin, has been cracking down, demanding extra work to make up for the missing hands. You hear him shouting at a boy who's barely old enough to hold a sickle, accusing him of slacking. The boy's father, one of the few who didn't join the pilgrims, looks like he's one bad day from packing up himself. You keep your head down, focusing on the furrow, but your thoughts are on the road east, where thousands are marching with nothing but crosses and dreams. Mid-morning, a stranger stumbles into the village, gaunt and filthy, his tunic torn. He's one of the pilgrims who left with Peter the Hermit, but he's back already, barely 2 weeks later. His name's Senric, a tanner from a nearby hamlet. You recognize him from the crowd that gathered around the preacher. He's leaning on a stick, his eyes hollow, and he's begging for bread. You offer him a crust, and he tells a story that makes your stomach twist. The People's Crusade, he says, is a mess. Thousands of peasants, men, women, children, are trudging across Europe with no food, no weapons, no plan. They've been raiding villages for supplies, angering local lords. Some have already starved or been beaten by bandits. Senric says he turned back when he saw a group of pilgrims ambushed by thieves. Most didn't survive. "It's no holy march," he mutters. "It's a death trap." His words spread through the village like damp rot. By noon, people are gathered around him, asking questions. Some call him a coward, saying he abandoned God's work. Others look shaken, clutching their children a little tighter. You're not sure what to believe. The preacher promised salvation, but Senric's story sounds like a nightmare. You think of Wulfric, your neighbor who left last week. Is he still alive? You push the thought away and go back to work, but the doubt lingers like a bad smell. As the day wears on, another group of pilgrims passes through, heading east. They're different from the first wave. Less singing, more desperation. A woman with a baby strapped to her chest asks for water. You give her what's left in your water skin, noticing her hands tremble as she drinks. Her husband, a skinny man with a homemade cross sewn to his sleeve, says they're headed to join Peter's army in Cologne. You ask if they're not afraid after what's happened. He shrugs, his voice flat. "If we stay, we starve. If we go, maybe God saves us." You don't know what to say to that. You watch them shuffle off, their shadows long against the road, and wonder how many will make it past the next hill. Back home, Etheldreda is quieter than usual. She's been coughing less, but her face is pale, and she's worried about the harvest. The Lord's taken more grain this year, and with so many gone, there's talk of famine if the crops fail. She asks you again about the crusade, her voice sharp with fear. "Are you thinking of going?" You shake your head, but it's not entirely true. The idea of leaving, of escaping the Lord's taxes, the endless work, the hunger, has taken root. But so has Senric's story, and the thought of your family alone keeps you tethered. You tell her you're staying, and she nods, but her eyes don't believe you. That night, the village gathers for a makeshift mass in the church, a squat stone building that smells of damp and candle wax. Father Alric is preaching, but his usual fire is gone. He talks about the crusade, urging the faithful to stay strong, but you notice he's not encouraging anyone to leave anymore. Maybe he's heard Senric's story, too. The congregation is sparse. Too many have already left. You kneel on the cold floor, your kids squirming beside you, and try to pray. But your mind is on the road, on the stories of bandits and starvation, on the promise of a city you can't even picture. The crusade feels both impossibly far and dangerously close, like a storm you can hear but not yet see. As you walk home under a starless sky, you pass the abandoned huts of those who joined the pilgrims. They're dark, their doors swinging in the wind. You wonder if you're a fool for staying, or if they're fools for leaving. Sleep comes slowly, the straw mattress prickling your skin. You dream of a road stretching endlessly eastward, lined with crosses and bones. When you wake, the village is quiet, but the world feels louder, as if the crusade is calling you, whether you want it to or not. The days blur into weeks, and it's now summer of 1096 in your village, where the air is thick with dust and the weight of uncertainty. You're still Eadric, still tethered to your fields, but the world beyond feels like it's unraveling faster than a poorly stitched tunic. The People's Crusade has swept through like a fever, taking more of your neighbors and leaving the village half empty. The fields are overgrown, the Lord's steward is angrier than ever, and the stories from the road are getting grimmer. You're trying to keep your head down, to focus on the harvest, but the Crusades are no longer just a distant idea. They're changing everything, even for a peasant like you who stayed put. You're up before dawn. As always, your hands already sore from yesterday's work. The ox is sick today, coughing like it's caught your wife's illness. So you're pulling the plow yourself, your shoulders burning with every step. The fields are a patchwork of neglect. Too many hands have left for the crusade, and those who remain can't keep up. You notice the Lord's men riding through, tallying who's still here and who's gone. They're not just counting heads. They're looking for excuses to seize land. Your neighbor's plot, abandoned when he joined the Pilgrims, has already been claimed by the Lord, his family's belongings tossed into the mud. You wonder if staying was the right choice, or if you're just delaying the inevitable. At midday, you rest by the stream. It's water murky and unsafe to drink. You're chewing on a tough strip of dried turnip when a group of strangers staggers into the village. They're not pilgrims this time, but survivors, limping back from the east. Their clothes are rags, their faces gaunt. One of them, a woman named Jitha, collapses near the church, sobbing. You and a few others gather around as she tells her story. She was with Peter the Hermit's group, 1,000 strong, but it's falling apart. They reached the Rhineland, she says, and started looting villages for food. The locals fought back, and hundreds of pilgrims were slaughtered. Jitha's husband was killed by a German lord's men, accused of stealing a pig. She fled, leaving everything behind. There's no salvation out there, she whispers. Just blood. Her words hit like a stone. The village is silent as people process what she said. The crusade was supposed to be holy, a path to Jerusalem and forgiveness. But Jitha's story paints a different picture. Chaos, hunger, and death before they even left Europe. You glance at your friend Alfric, who's been talking about joining the crusade himself. His face is pale, his hands clenched. You want to say something, but what? The preacher's promises are starting to feel like lies, but the pull of something bigger still tugs at you. You go back to the fields, your mind heavy. The sun is merciless, and the crops are thinning. Too little rain, too few workers. You wonder how you'll feed your family through winter. By evening, the village is abuzz with Jitha's story. Some call her a liar, saying she must have sinned to be punished like that. Others are shaken, rethinking their plans to leave. Father Alric tries to calm everyone, preaching about perseverance and God's will, but his voice lacks its usual conviction. You notice he's been hoarding extra bread from the church offerings, and it makes you wonder if he believes his own sermons. Your wife, Etheldreda, is waiting when you get home, her cough worse again. She's heard about Jitha and begs you not to go. "We need you here," she says, her voice cracking. You nod, but inside you're torn. The fields are failing, the Lord's taxes are crushing, and the promise of salvation feels like the only light in a darkening world. That night, you can't sleep. The straw mattress is as uncomfortable as ever, and the sound of your wife's coughing keeps you awake. You step outside, the air cool and heavy with the smell of damp earth. In the distance, you see flickers of light, torches, maybe from another group of pilgrims passing through. You wonder where they're going, what they're hoping to find. You think of Jerusalem, a city you've only heard about in church, a place of golden light and holy relics. But then you think of Jitha's hollow eyes, Senric's trembling hands, and the stories of bandits and starvation. The crusade feels like a gamble, and you're not sure you can afford the stakes. As you stand there, staring at the dark road, a boy runs up, panting. It's Leofric's son, barely 10 years old. He says his father left tonight, slipped away to join the pilgrims. You curse under your breath. Leofric was one of the few left who knew how to fix a plow. The village is crumbling, and the Lord won't care. He'll just demand more from those who stay. You go back inside, your heart heavy. The crusade is pulling your world apart, piece by piece, and you're not even on the road. You lie down, the straw poking your back, and try to imagine a future where you don't have to choose between survival and salvation. But in 1096, that future feels as distant as Jerusalem itself. Autumn has crept into your village, and the air carries a bite that promises a harsh winter. It's late 1096, and the People's Crusade has become a grim legend in your small corner of northern France. You're Eadric, still bound to your fields, your family, and the relentless grind of peasant life. The fervor that swept through months ago has left a hollow aftermath. Empty huts, untended crops, and a village teetering on the edge of survival. The stories of the pilgrims' failures are piling up like fallen leaves. But now there's talk of a new wave, a real crusade led by knights and nobles, not ragged preachers like Peter the Hermit. For you, it's just another rumor in a world already heavy with uncertainty, but it's starting to change the way you see your place in it. You're in the fields again, harvesting what little barley survived the dry summer. Your hands are raw, your back screaming from bending over the sickle. The Lord's men have been circling, demanding extra grain to feed the knights gathering for this new crusade. You've heard they're assembling in nearby towns, clad in armor, with horses and banners that make Peter's ragtag pilgrims look like a bad joke. You've never seen a knight up close, just glimpsed their shining mail from a distance, like stars you're not meant to touch. The steward, Godwin, has been louder than usual, barking orders to squeeze every last bushel from the village. He says the Lord is supporting the crusade, sending men and supplies. You wonder what that means for you. More taxes probably, or worse, a draft. As you work, a cart rumbles into the village, driven by a merchant you recognize from the market in the next town. He's not selling today, just passing through, but he's got news. The People's Crusade, he says, is over. Peter the Hermit's army, tens of thousands of peasants like you, reached Asia Minor and was slaughtered by the Turks at a place called Civitat. Men, women, children cut down or sold into slavery. The merchant's voice is flat, like he's reciting a list of goods, but the words hit you hard. You think of Wulfric, Leofric, the widow with her 2 boys. Were they there? Are they dead? You don't ask because you don't want to know. The merchant moves on, leaving the village stunned. Even the steward looks shaken, though he quickly starts shouting again to cover it. You pause to eat, sitting on a stump with a hunk of bread that's more grit than grain. Your neighbor Alfric joins you, his face lined with worry. He's one of the few who didn't leave, but his brother did, and he's had no word since. They said it was God's will, he mutters, staring at the ground. What kind of God wants that? You don't have an answer. You've been to church every Sunday, prayed when Father Alric told you to, but the idea of a holy war feels further away than ever. You think of your wife, Etheldreda, still coughing, and your kids who are starting to look too thin. The harvest won't be enough this year, and the Lord's demands keep growing. The crusade, even this new one with knights, feels like someone else's fight. By afternoon, you're back in the fields, but the village is buzzing with the merchant's news. Some say the pilgrims deserved it for their sins, looting, fighting, straying from God's path. Others whisper that the Turks are demons, unstoppable, and that even the knights won't stand a chance. You try to focus on your work, but the sickle feels heavier today. You notice fewer people in the fields. Some have slipped away, maybe to join the new crusade, maybe just to hide from the steward's wrath. You hear a rumor that the Lord himself is planning to ride east, taking his best men. If he goes, he'll need supplies, which means more grain, more labor, more of your life ground into the dirt. When you get home, Etheldreda is mending a torn blanket, her fingers trembling from cold or sickness. You're not sure. The kids are quiet, playing with a stick in the corner of the hut. You tell her about the merchant's news, and her face tightens. Let them fight their wars, she says. We've got enough to survive here, but surviving is getting harder. The Lord's men took half your grain last week, and the rest won't last past spring. You're starting to hear talk of famine in nearby villages, where the fields were abandoned entirely. The crusade is draining the land, pulling men and food away, leaving those who stay to scrape by on less and less. That night, the church is packed for Mass, the air thick with candle smoke and fear. Father Alric preaches about the new crusade, saying the knights will succeed where the peasants failed. He calls for donations, grain, cloth, anything to support the holy cause. You notice he's wearing a new cloak, finer than anything a village priest should own. You drop a single turnip in the collection basket, all you can spare, and feel a pang of guilt mixed with resentment. As you walk home, the wind carries the sound of hoofbeats. Knights, maybe, passing through on their way to muster. Their armor clanks like a warning, a reminder that the world is moving, and you're still stuck in the mud. You lie down, the straw mattress as unforgiving as ever, and try to sleep. But the merchant's words keep echoing. Slaughter, slavery, a holy war gone wrong. You think of Jerusalem, a city you've been told is God's own, but all you can picture now is blood and dust. The crusade is no longer a distant dream. It's a shadow over your life, taking your neighbors, your harvest, your hope. As you drift off, you hear the wind howling, and it sounds like the voices of all those pilgrims who never made it home. Winter's grip tightens on your village as 1096 fades into 1097. The air is sharp, slicing through your threadbare tunic like a knife. You're Eadric, still here, still a peasant, your life a cycle of toil and survival in a world reshaped by the Crusades. The People's Crusade is a fading nightmare, its failure whispered about like a ghost story, but the real crusade, the one led by knights and nobles, is gaining momentum. You feel it in the heavier taxes, the emptier fields, and the way the Lord's men watch everyone like hawks. For you, a man bound to the soil, the Crusades are no longer just a call to faith. They're a force pulling your world apart, piece by muddy piece. You wake to frost on the ground, your breath visible in the dim light of your hut. The fire's gone out, and the cold seeps into your bones. Your wife, Etheldreda, is coughing again. Worse now, her face pale as the snow outside. The kids huddle under a single blanket, too thin to keep them warm. You've been rationing the pottage, stretching it with extra water and a few withered roots, but it's not enough. The harvest was meager, and the Lord took more than ever to supply the knights heading east. You're down to a few handfuls of barley, and the thought of spring feels like a cruel joke. You pull on your tunic, stiff with grime, and head out to check the traps you set for rabbits. Poaching is a risk. If the Lord's men catch you, it's a flogging or worse. But hunger doesn't care about laws. The village is quieter now, almost ghostly. Half the huts are empty, their owners either dead on the road to Jerusalem or hiding from the steward's demands. You pass the church where Father Alric is nailing a parchment to the door, a call for more supplies for the crusade. You can't read, but you know what it means: more grain, more cloth, more of what you don't have. You check your traps, but they're empty, the rabbits smarter than you today. As you trudge back, you spot a group of armed men riding into the village. Knights, real ones, their armor glinting despite the gray sky. They're not here to pray, they're here to collect. The steward scrambles to meet them, bowing low, his usual scowl replaced by nervous deference. You keep your distance, watching from the edge of the square. The knights are tall, their horses massive, their voices loud with authority. They're talking about the crusade, about ships gathering at ports, about battles to come in distant lands. One of them, a broad man with a red cross on his cloak, demands oxen and grain. The steward protests. There's barely enough to feed the village, but the knight cuts him off, saying the Lord has pledged his support. You feel a knot in your stomach. Your ox, already half dead, is one of the few left. If they take it, you can't plow come spring. You slip away before they notice you, your heart pounding. The Crusades, which once seemed like a distant holy quest, are now a fist closing around your life. At home, Etheldreda is trying to mend a torn sack, her hands shaking. You tell her about the knights, and her eyes widen. "They'll take everything," she whispers. You nod, unable to argue. The kids are quiet, sensing the tension. You try to distract them with a story about a fox outsmarting a wolf, but your voice falters. The truth is, you're scared. The village is starving, the Lord's demands are crushing, and the crusade is eating what little you have left. You think of Jitha, the woman who came back from the People's Crusade, her warnings about blood and chaos. You wonder if this new crusade will be any different, or if it's just a bigger beast with sharper teeth. By evening, the knights are gone, but they've taken 2 oxen, a cart of grain, and the last of the village's wool. The steward is raging, blaming the peasants for not working hard enough. You hear him threaten to double the labor days, as if you could give any more. You sit by the fire, the pottage thinner than ever, and try to plan. You could sell your only blanket, but it won't buy enough food. You could beg the priest for charity, but he's hoarding for himself. You could join the crusade, take the cross and hope for salvation, or at least a meal, but the thought of leaving your family twists your gut. Etheldreda catches your eye, and you know she's thinking the same thing. "We'll manage," she says, but her voice is hollow. That night, you lie awake, the cold seeping through the walls. The village is silent, but you hear distant hoofbeats. More knights, maybe, or bandits drawn by the chaos. The Crusades are no longer just a preacher's dream or a knight's glory. They're a storm, tearing through your world, taking food, animals, and hope. You think of Jerusalem, a city you'll never see, and wonder if it's worth all this. Your wife coughs beside you, and you pull the blanket tighter around her. Sleep comes slowly, haunted by the clank of armor and the fear of what tomorrow will demand. Spring of 1097 dawns with a reluctant warmth, the frost giving way to mud that clings to your bare feet like a second skin. You're Eadric, still rooted in your village, a peasant caught in the churn of a world reshaped by the First Crusade. The People's Crusade is a bitter memory, its failure a warning etched in the faces of those who returned. Now, the knight-led crusade is in full swing, and its shadow looms larger than ever. Your village is a skeleton of what it was. Fields lie fallow, huts stand empty, and the Lord's demands grow sharper as he funnels men and supplies to the holy war. You're still here, still fighting to keep your family alive, but the Crusades are no longer just a distant clamor. They're a weight on your shoulders, heavier than the plow you drag through the earth. You wake to the sound of your wife, Etheldreda, coughing, a dry, rattling sound that's worse than last month. The hut is colder than it should be, the fire reduced to embers because firewood is scarce. The Lord's men took most of it for the night's camps, leaving you to scavenge sticks from the hedgerows. You pull on your tunic, stiff with dirt, and step outside. The village is stirring, but it's a hollow kind of life. The church bell rings, calling everyone to mass, but fewer answer these days. Some are too weak from hunger. Others have lost faith in Father Alric's promises. You're not sure where you stand, but you go anyway, if only to keep the steward's eyes off you. In the church, the air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and damp stone. Father Alric preaches about the Knights' Crusade, saying they've reached Constantinople, a city you can't even imagine. He speaks of victories to come, of Jerusalem reclaimed, but his words feel like ash. You notice the collection basket is fuller than usual. People are giving what little they have, hoping for miracles. You drop in a single turnip, your stomach twisting as you do. Outside, you overhear the steward, Godwin, talking to a knight squire. They're planning to conscript men from the village to serve as porters for the crusade, carrying supplies for the army. Your heart sinks. You're no soldier, but you're strong enough to carry a sack, and that's all they care about. If they take you, your family won't survive the summer. You head to the fields, where the new crops are struggling in the rocky soil. The ox is gone, taken by the knights last winter, and you're pulling the plow with Alfric, your last remaining friend in the village. He's quieter now, his brother's absence a wound that won't heal. You work in silence, the only sound the scrape of wood against earth. At noon, you rest under a tree, sharing a scrap of bread. Alfric tells you he's heard rumors of the Crusades' progress. Battles in far-off lands, knights fighting men who ride horses faster than the wind. You try to picture it, but all you can see is your own field, your own hunger, your own wife's cough. The crusade feels like a story for lords and priests, not for you. By afternoon, the village is buzzing with new arrivals. Not pilgrims this time, but refugees. They're from a village to the south, fleeing bandits who've grown bold in the crusade's wake. With so many men gone, the roads are lawless, and thieves prey on the weak. The refugees beg for food, but there's none to spare. You give them a handful of barley, knowing it means less for your kids. One of them, an old man with a scarred face, tells you the bandits are former pilgrims, men who joined the People's Crusade and turned to robbery when it failed. You think of Wulfric, wondering if he's one of them now, or if he's just bones in a foreign field. The thought makes you shiver, even in the spring sun. Back home, Etheldreda is trying to mend a pot, her hands too weak to hold the needle steady. The kids are outside, chasing a chicken they'll never catch. You sit by the fire, the pottage thinner than ever, and tell her about the refugees. Her eyes darken, "We can't keep giving," she says. "We'll have nothing left." She's right, but the guilt gnaws at you. You think of the knights, their armor shining, their horses fed better than your family. The crusade is supposed to be God's work, but all you see is suffering, yours, the refugees, the pilgrims who never came back. You wonder if Jerusalem is worth it, or if it's just a dream to keep you all marching toward death. That night, you lie on your straw mattress, the cold seeping through the walls. Etheldreda's cough is a steady rhythm, like a drumbeat you can't escape. You hear shouts in the distance. Bandits, maybe, or more knights demanding supplies. The crusade has turned your world into a place of fear, where every stranger could be a threat, every demand a step closer to ruin. You close your eyes, trying to imagine a city of gold and light, but all you see is mud, hunger, and a road that leads nowhere. Sleep comes slowly, carrying you into dreams of a world where survival doesn't feel like a punishment. Summer's heat blankets your village in 1098, the air heavy with the smell of dry earth and desperation. You're still Eadric, a peasant clinging to survival in a world reshaped by the First Crusade. The knights' armies have marched far beyond your horizon, their banners fading into tales of distant battles, but their absence hasn't brought peace. Your village is a husk, drained by taxes, abandoned by neighbors, and stalked by hunger. The fields yield less each year, your wife's cough worsens, and the Lord's men grow crueler as the Crusade's demands tighten their grip. You're still here, still plowing, but the holy war feels like a curse, its ripples tearing at the fragile threads of your life. You rise at dawn, the straw mattress leaving fresh welts on your back. The hut is stifling, the fire unlit to save wood. Etheldreda is asleep, her breathing shallow, her face thinner than you've ever seen. The kids are already up, scavenging for berries behind the hut. There's no pottage today, the pot scraped clean. You pull on your tunic, its patches barely holding together, and head to the fields. The Lord Steward, Godwin, is there, whip in hand, shouting at a boy who's collapsed from exhaustion. The harvest is starting, but there aren't enough hands. You work alone, your sickle dull, your arms shaking. The barley is sparse, blighted by drought, and you know it won't be enough to satisfy the Lord, let alone your family. Mid-morning, a stranger arrives. Not a pilgrim or refugee, but a messenger, his horse lathered with sweat. He rides to the church, and soon the village gathers, curious but wary. The messenger unfurls a parchment, his voice carrying over the crowd. The crusade, he says, has won a great victory at Antioch, a city you've never heard of. The knights fought for months, besieged and starving, but God granted them triumph. Jerusalem is next, he claims, and the Lord is calling for more supplies to support the final push. The crowd murmurs, some cheering weakly, others silent. You feel nothing but dread. More supplies mean more grain, more animals, more of your life stripped away. The messenger leaves, but his words linger like a storm cloud. You return to the fields, your mind churning. Antioch's victory means nothing to you. You're not even sure where it is. All you know is the Lord will demand more, and you have nothing left to give. You think of Alfric, who's taken to drinking sour ale to dull his grief over his missing brother. He's barely working, and the stewards noticed. You try to talk to him at noon, sharing a scrap of moldy bread under a tree. "They'll take my land," he says, his voice slurred. "Might as well die in Jerusalem." You urge him to stay, but his eyes are empty. The crusade has broken him, not with swords, but with loss and hunger. By afternoon, the steward rounds up the village's men, announcing that 2 will be conscripted as porters for the Crusade's supply train. Your name isn't called, but Alfric's is. He doesn't protest, just nods and walks away, like he's already gone. You want to stop him, but the steward's whip cracks near another man who hesitates, and you keep silent. The village feels smaller with every departure, as if the crusade is swallowing it whole. You work until dusk, your hands bleeding from the sickle, your stomach a knot of hunger and fear. The barley you've cut will go to the Lord, leaving you with chaff and promises. At home, Etheldreda is worse, her cough now a wet rasp. You boil water with a few herbs, the only medicine you can offer. The kids are quiet, their eyes too big for their faces. You try to tell them a story, but your voice cracks. The hut feels like a trap, the walls closing in. You step outside, the night air warm but heavy. In the distance, you see campfires, bandits, maybe, or knights on the move. The roads are no longer safe, not with so many men gone and the Lord's protection stretched thin. You think of the messenger's words of Antioch and Jerusalem and wonder why God's victory feels like your defeat. That night, you lie awake, Etheldreda's breathing a fragile thread beside you. The Crusade is a beast, devouring your world from afar. You've heard the priests call it holy, the knights call it glory, but to you, it's a thief stealing your neighbors, your harvest, your hope. You think of Alfric marching off to carry sacks for men in armor and wonder if he'll come back. You think of your wife fading before your eyes and your kids who might not see another summer. Sleep comes slowly, haunted by the clatter of hooves and the weight of a war you'll never fight but can't escape. The autumn of 1099 settles over your village like a shroud, the leaves falling as if in mourning for the world you once knew. You're Eadric, a peasant still bound to the unforgiving soil of northern France. Your life a fragile thread in the tapestry of the First Crusade. The knights' armies are far away, their victories and struggles mere rumors carried by weary travelers. But their war has left your village gasping. The fields are barren, your neighbors are ghosts, either gone to the crusade, dead from hunger, or fled from bandits. Your wife, Etheldreda, clings to life, her cough a constant shadow, and your children grow thinner by the day. The crusade, once a distant call to salvation, is now a relentless force, stripping your world to the bone. You wake to a gray dawn, the hut damp and cold. The straw mattress is more dirt than straw now, and your tunic is little more than rags. Etheldreda is still, her breathing so faint you check to make sure she's alive. The kids are curled together for warmth, their faces pinched with hunger. There's no food today. The last of the barley went to the Lord's men yesterday. Payment for taxes you couldn't avoid. You've been chewing nettles to dull the ache in your stomach, but it's not enough. You step outside, the air sharp with the promise of frost. The village is eerily silent, the church bell still for once. Father Alric hasn't been seen in days. Rumor is he's holed up in the church, guarding his hoard of offerings. You head to the fields, though there's little left to do. The harvest is over, and what little you reaped was taken. You're scavenging now, pulling up roots, searching for anything edible. As you work, a group of strangers limps into the village. More refugees, their eyes hollow, their clothes torn. They're not from the crusade, but from a town ravaged by famine and bandits. One of them, a woman with a child clinging to her, begs for shelter. You want to help, but your own hut is barely standing, and you've nothing to share. She moves on, her child's wails echoing in your ears. You think of your own kids and feel a pang of guilt, mixed with a growing numbness. The crusade has turned the world into a place where survival feels like betrayal. By noon, you're back in the village square, where a rare sight greets you. A knight, alone, his armor dented, his horse limping. He's not like the proud warriors who rode through last year. His face is haggard, his eyes distant. The villagers gather, wary but curious. He says he's returned from the crusade, one of the few to make it back. Jerusalem, he says, was taken this summer, the holy city reclaimed after a bloody siege. The crowd gasps, some crossing themselves, but you notice the knight's voice is flat, his words heavy. He speaks of slaughter, Christians, Muslims, Jews, cut down in the streets, blood running like rivers. God's will, he mutters, but he doesn't sound convinced. You wonder what he's seen, what could break a man in armor. The knight's news spreads, but it brings no joy. Jerusalem's fall means nothing when your belly's empty and your wife's dying. You ask him about the porters, men like Alfric who were conscripted. He shakes his head. Most died, he says, from disease, starvation, or arrows. You feel a stab of grief for Alfric, though you'd half expected it. The knight asks for food, but no one has any to give. He rides off, leaving the village to its misery. You return to your scavenging, your hands trembling. Not from cold, but from the weight of it all. The crusade was supposed to save souls, but all it's done is break bodies, yours included. At home, Etheldreda is awake, her eyes feverish. You try to feed her a paste of crushed nettles, but she can barely swallow. The kids sit by her, silent, their childhood stolen by hunger. You light a fire with the last of your wood, the smoke stinging your eyes. Outside, you hear shouts, bandits, maybe, or desperate villagers fighting over scraps. The crusade has unleashed chaos, turning neighbor against neighbor, stripping away what little order remained. You think of the night's words, of Jerusalem's blood-soaked streets, and wonder if God is watching it all. That night, you lie beside Etheldreda, her body frail against yours. The hut is dark, the fire dead. You try to pray, but the words feel empty. The crusade has taken everything, your friends, your harvest, your faith. You think of the holy city, a place you'll never see, and it feels like a lie told to keep you suffering. Your children's breathing is the only sound, faint but steady. You cling to it, a fragile anchor in a world that's slipping away. Sleep comes slowly, haunted by visions of a city you don't understand and a war that's left you behind. Winter's claws dig deep into your village as 1099 fades into 1100. The cold, a merciless reminder of how little you have left. You're Eadric, a peasant who's outlived most of your neighbors, though survival feels more like a punishment than a victory. The First Crusade has ended, Jerusalem taken, but its echoes linger in your shattered world. Your village is a graveyard of empty huts, its fields choked with weeds, its people broken by hunger and loss. Etheldreda's cough has silenced, not from healing but from death, her absence a wound that bleeds through every moment. Your children, frail and quiet, are all that keep you moving. The crusade, once a promise of salvation, has left you with nothing but ashes and a question. Was it worth it? You wake in the dark, the hut colder than a tomb. The straw mattress is gone, traded for a handful of grain that's already run out. You sleep on the dirt floor now, your tunic so thin it barely keeps the chill at bay. Your kids huddle close, their breaths shallow. There's no food today, hasn't been for days. You've been boiling bark to make a bitter broth, but it's more hope than nourishment. You step outside, the snow crunching under your bare feet. The village is still, the church abandoned since Father Alric fled with his hoard of offerings. The Lord's manor is quiet too. Rumor is he died in the crusade, and his steward, Godwin, has vanished, leaving no one to collect taxes but also no one to protect you. You scavenge in the woods, searching for anything. Roots, frozen berries, a dead bird. The forest is picked clean, the animals gone or hunted out. You find a few twigs for a fire and head back, your hands numb. On the way, you pass a group of strangers, not refugees but scavengers, picking through the abandoned huts. They eye you warily, hands on knives. The Crusade's aftermath has turned the world feral. Every man a thief, every scrap a fight. You keep moving, clutching your twigs like treasure. The village square is empty. The cross where Peter the Hermit once preached now leaning, half buried in snow. You think of his promises, salvation, forgiveness, a new life. All lies, or so it seems. At noon, you sit by a weak fire, your kids too tired to speak. You try to tell them a story, but your voice is hoarse, your mind blank. You think of Etheldreda, her warmth, her stubborn hope. She died a month ago, her body too weak to fight the fever that came with her cough. You buried her behind the hut, a shallow grave marked with a stone. The kids don't ask about her anymore, but you see her in their eyes. You wonder if you're failing them, if you should have joined the crusade, risked everything for a chance at something better. But the stories of Jerusalem, blood, disease, betrayal, haunt you. You stayed to protect your family, but protection feels like a cruel joke now. By afternoon, a lone traveler arrives, a monk with a tattered robe and a wooden cross. He's the first holy man you've seen in months, and the villagers, those few left, gather weekly. He speaks of the Crusade's end, of Jerusalem's new Christian lords, of pilgrims now safe to visit the holy city. His words are meant to inspire, but they fall flat. You ask if the war brought peace, if the hunger will end. He hesitates, then admits the roads are worse, bandits bolder, famine spreading. God tests us, he says, but you're too tired for tests. You offer him a sip of bark broth. He declines and moves on, his cross swinging like a pendulum. Back home, you try to keep the fire going, but the twigs burn too fast. The kids are asleep or pretending to be. You sit in the dark, the wind howling through the cracks in the walls. You think of the crusade, of the men who left, Wulfric, Leofric, Alfric, and the ones who came back broken, like the knight with his hollow eyes. You think of Jerusalem, a city you'll never see, its streets paved with blood, not gold. The crusade was supposed to save you, but it's left you poorer, lonelier, hungrier. You wonder if God cares, or if he's as distant as the holy city itself. That night, you lie on the cold floor, your kids pressed against you for warmth. Their breathing is faint, a fragile thread in a world unraveling. You try to pray, but the words are gone, replaced by memories of Etheldreda's smile, the village before the crusade. A life that wasn't easy, but wasn't this. The crusade has ended, but its scars remain. Empty fields, broken families, a faith that feels like a lie. You close your eyes, hoping for sleep, for a dream of a world where you don't wake to hunger. The wind carries you away, a whisper of hoofbeats fading into silence. A peasant's war finally over, but at a cost you'll carry forever. Spring of 1100 creeps into your village, a timid thaw that does little to ease the ache in your bones or the emptiness in your gut. You're Eadric, still a peasant, still alive, though each day feels like a debt you can't pay. The First Crusade is over, its tales of Jerusalem's conquest already fading into legend, but its wounds are fresh. Your wife, Etheldreda, gone, your children frail, your village a scattering of ruins. The world has moved on, or so the priests say, but for you, it's as if time has stopped, frozen in the mud of a life reshaped by a war you never fought. You're still here, clinging to what's left, but the future is as murky as the stream that runs through the village, and survival is a task that grows heavier with each dawn. You wake on the dirt floor of your hut, the cold seeping through your ragged tunic. Your children, Alric and Edith, sleep beside you, their small bodies curled tight against the chill. They're thinner than ever, their cheeks hollow, their eyes too old for their years. You've no blanket now, no mattress, just a pile of straw you scavenged from the fields. The hut's walls are crumbling, the thatch roof leaking even on dry days. You rise quietly, your joints creaking, and step outside. The village is a ghost of itself. Half the huts collapsed, their timbers stolen by scavengers or burned for warmth. The fields are wild, untended, and the Lord's manor looms silent, its new master yet to arrive. You heard he's a cousin of the old Lord, a man who stayed behind while others marched to Jerusalem. You wonder what he'll demand, or if he'll care about a village that's barely alive. You head to the woods, hoping to find something. Mushrooms, herbs, anything to fill the pot. The forest is quiet, its bounty stripped by winter's desperation. You dig through the underbrush, your hands raw, and find a few bitter roots. It's not enough, but it's something. As you work, you hear voices. Strangers, not bandits, but traders, their cart creaking along the road. They're the first travelers in weeks, and you watch from the trees, cautious. They stop in the village square, unloading sacks of grain and cloth. You creep closer, listening. They're selling, not giving, and their prices are steep: 3 days' labor for a loaf, a week for a sack of barley. You've no coin, no labor to spare, but the sight of bread makes your mouth water. You slip away before they notice you, clutching your roots like a lifeline. Back in the village, the trader's arrival stirs what's left of the community. A handful of survivors gather, bartering what little they have: pots, tools, a patched cloak. You see old Jitha, the woman who returned from the People's Crusade, her face lined with grief. She trades a knife for a crust of bread, her hands trembling. You nod to her, but neither of you speaks. Words feel pointless now when every day is a fight to eat. You return to your hut, where Alric and Edith are awake, their eyes fixed on the roots you've brought. You boil them into a thin gruel, the fire weak, the smoke stinging. The kids eat slowly, savoring each bitter spoonful. You take none, lying that you've already eaten. Your stomach growls, but their survival matters more than yours. By noon, you're in the fields trying to reclaim a patch of land. The new lord's men have been spotted in nearby villages, assessing what's left, and you know they'll come here soon. If you can show a crop, even a small one, you might keep your plot. You dig with a broken hoe, the soil hard and unforgiving. Your hands blister, your back aches, but you keep going. You think of Etheldreda, how she'd hum while mending, how she'd find hope in the smallest things. You try to hold on to that, but it's like grasping smoke. The crusade took her, not directly, but through the hunger and sickness it left behind. You wonder if she's watching, if she blames you for staying, for not chasing the promise of Jerusalem. As the sun dips, a horn sounds, the new lord's men arriving at last. You trudge to the square, where a dozen villagers stand, wary and worn. The Lord Steward, a sharp-eyed man named Osbert, rides in with a handful of soldiers. He's younger than Godwin, but his voice is just as cold. He reads from a parchment, claiming the village for the new lord, demanding labor and grain to rebuild the manor. There's no mention of the crusade, no promise of protection, just orders. You feel a flicker of anger, but it's buried under exhaustion. Osbert's eyes scan the crowd, lingering on you. Strong enough to work, he says, pointing. You're conscripted to repair the manor's walls, starting tomorrow. You nod, knowing refusal means losing everything. At home, you tell Alric and Edith to stay inside while you're gone. Alric, barely 8, tries to look brave, promising to care for his sister. Edith clings to your hand, her fingers cold. You light a fire with your last twigs, the gruel long gone. The hut is dark, the wind whistling through the cracks. You think of the knight who spoke of Jerusalem's blood, the monk who promised peace, the traders with their unreachable bread. The crusade is over, but its cost lingers. Your wife, your friends, your faith, all gone. You wonder if the new lord will be better, or if he'll just take what's left. You lie down, your kids pressed close, their breathing a faint comfort. Sleep comes slowly, adrift into a world of mud and memory, where the crusade's shadow stretches long and cold. Summer's warmth spreads across your village in 1100, but it does little to thaw the chill of despair that clings to your days. You're Eadric, a peasant worn thin by loss and labor, still tethered to the crumbling remains of a life reshaped by the First Crusade. Jerusalem is a distant memory for the knights who claimed it, but for you, its shadow lingers in the empty fields, the hunger in your children's eyes, and the absence of Etheldreda, your wife, whose death still feels like a fresh wound. The new lord's men now rule the village, their demands as heavy as the old lord's, and you're caught in a cycle of work that offers no rest, no hope. Yet you endure, for Alric and Edith, your children, who are all you have left in a world that feels like it's forgotten you. You wake to the crow of a scrawny rooster, the only one left in the village after bandits raided last month. The hut is stifling, the air thick with the smell of damp straw and earth. Alric and Edith are asleep, sprawled on the dirt floor, their thin frames barely stirring. You've no food to wake them with. Yesterday's meal was a handful of wild greens, and the pot sits empty. Your tunic, patched beyond recognition, clings to your sweat-soaked skin as you step outside. The village is stirring, a faint pulse of life among the ruins. A few huts still stand, their occupants as weary as you, their fields a patchwork of weeds and hope. The Lord's manor looms in the distance, its walls rebuilt with your labor, a monument to your sacrifice. You're due at the manor today, conscripted by the new steward, Osbert, to dig ditches for drainage. The work is brutal, unpaid, and unpaid, and it keeps you from your own field, where you've planted a few seeds scavenged from last year's chaff. You grab a broken shovel and join the handful of villagers trudging to the manor, your feet sinking into the mud. The steward's soldiers watch, their hands on swords, their bellies full while yours gnaws at itself. You dig in silence, the sun burning your neck, your hands blistering. The other workers, old Jitha, a boy named Wulfric's son, and a newcomer who arrived last week, say little. The Crusades' fervor is gone, replaced by a grim determination to survive another day. Midday brings a brief pause, and you sit by the ditch, chewing a blade of grass to trick your stomach. A rider gallops into the village, not a knight but a tax collector, his cloak marked with the new lord's colors. He meets Osbert at the manor, and you overhear snippets, demands for grain to feed a new wave of pilgrims heading to Jerusalem, now that it's safe. The village has no grain, barely enough to feed itself, but Osbert nods, his face hard. You know what this means. He'll take whatever you grow, leaving you to starve. You think of Alric and Edith, waiting at home, and feel a flicker of defiance, quickly smothered by fear. You're too weak to fight, too needed to run. The work drags on, and by dusk, you're back in the village, your body screaming. You check your field, where a few green shoots have sprouted, too few, too frail, but enough to keep you hoping. At home, Alric is whittling a stick, his hands steadier now, and his eyes are bright. He's found a nest with 2 eggs. Edith claps, her small face lighting up. You boil the eggs in water, the stream's murkiness hidden by the fire's glow. You give them the eggs, watching them eat, their smiles a balm for your exhaustion. You sip the water, pretending it's filling, and you tell them a story of a bird that flies to the sea, a tale Etheldreda used to tell. For a moment, the hut feels like a home again, but the moment fades. A scream pierces the night, and you step outside, heart pounding. It's Jitha, her hut ablaze, flames licking the thatch. You run to help, but it's too late. Bandits, or maybe villagers desperate for warmth, have set the fire and fled. Jitha stands weeping, her few belongings gone. You offer her your hut for the night, knowing it stretches your resources thinner. She accepts, her gratitude heavy. The village is no longer a community, but a collection of survivors. Each loss a reminder of how close you are to the edge. You think of the Crusade, its promises of salvation, and wonder if it's cursed the land itself. That night, you lie on the dirt, Alric and Edith asleep, Jitha snoring softly in the corner. The air is warm, but you shiver, haunted by the fire's glow, the tax collector's demands, the endless work. The crusade is over, but its scars are your life. Etheldreda's grave, your neighbor's absence, your children's hunger. You think of Jerusalem, a city of gold in the priest's tales, but all you see is mud, flame, and a road that leads nowhere. Sleep creeps in, slow and heavy, carrying you into a dream of fields that grow without toil, where your family is whole, and the crusade is just a story someone else tells.